My drunk dad abandoned us, now he wants forgiveness? Hey Reddit, I'm at a complete loss and I really need some outside perspective. Buckle up, because this is a mess. My name is James, and I'm 21. My sister, Clara, is 11. She was born when I was 10, and it was complicated. Our mom passed away giving birth to her. It shattered my dad, but instead of grieving properly, he turned to the bottle. He was already prone to drinking, but it became a full-blown addiction after mom died. Clara was a tiny, wailing thing, and dad was always gone. Not physically, but he was a shell of himself. He brought her home from the hospital, placed her in her bassinet, and then disappeared into the living room with a bottle of whiskey. I remember being a scared kid, having to figure out how to change diapers, mix formula, and soothe a crying baby. I had no choice but to learn quickly. We didn't live close to any family members and no one truly knew our living situation at home. The 8 years that followed were hell. I was essentially Clara's dad. I cooked, cleaned, did laundry, helped with homework, and tried to shield her from our dad's drunken rages. He wasn't physically abusive to us, thankfully, but the screaming, the broken furniture, the sheer unpredictability of it all was terrifying. I remember nights where Clara, maybe 5 or 6, would crawl into my bed, her little body trembling, and I'd hold her until she fell asleep, whispering stories I made up to calm her. I missed out on so much. School events, hanging out with friends, just being a normal teenager. I was always rushing home to make sure Clara was okay, to make sure dad hadn't set the house on fire. I was a kid forced to be an adult, and Clara was just a kid forced to grow up too fast. When I turned 18, dad vanished. Just gone. No note, no goodbye, nothing. He left his wallet and phone, which made it even more unsettling. It was like he just evaporated. I was terrified. What if he was dead? What if he was hurt? But then I looked at Clara, who was 8 then, her eyes wide with fear, and I knew I had to be strong for her. I used dad's phone to call his best friend. He came and that's how Clara and I met our aunt from dad's side. She was helpful, giving me more free time to myself. I worked odd jobs and anything I could find to help my aunt out. I worked hard until I was able to land a good job that paid well. After making enough savings, I contacted my mother's sister Jess. Jess gave me money my mom left behind. We did not receive it because my dad didn't even take us to her funeral and cut us off from her side. Aunt Jess helped me get a place near hers and helped me apply for legal guardianship of Clara, and after a lot of frustrating paperwork, I was granted full custody. Clara was struggling with the trauma of being abandoned by dad. She had nightmares, separation anxiety, and trust issues. Aunt Jess got us in therapy together, and slowly, we started to heal. Now, Clara is 11. She's bright, funny, and resilient. She loves drawing, playing soccer, and making terrible puns. She's my world. I've managed to get my GED, and I work full-time at a local bookstore, which gives me enough to keep us comfortable. Clara goes to a good school, has friends, and is finally starting to feel like a normal kid. Then, 3 weeks ago, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. It was him. Dad. He sounded different. Sober. He said he'd been in rehab, that he was a new man, and that he wanted to see us. He wanted to explain. I hung up. He kept calling, leaving voicemails, sending texts. He even showed up at the bookstore. I told him to leave. I told him I never wanted to see him again. He then contacted Clara's school and tried to pick her up. Luckily, they called me first. I had to explain the whole situation to the principal, which was mortifying. Now, he's sending letters, long, rambling apologies filled with self-pity and promises of change. He says he understands if I can't forgive him, but he hopes that Clara will. He claims he misses his little girl. Misses her? He abandoned her. He abandoned us. I'm so angry. I'm angry at him for leaving, for putting us through hell, for thinking he can just waltz back into our lives after 3 years and expect forgiveness. Clara knows something is wrong. She's seen the letters, and heard me on the phone. She hasn't asked directly, but I can see the questions in her eyes. I don't know what to tell her. Reddit, I need advice. Should I let him see Clara? Should I even consider talking to him? How do I protect her from him? How do I protect myself? Am I being too harsh? I feel like I owe it to Clara to at least hear him out, but I also feel like I owe it to myself to tell him to go to hell. Update, the fallout and a difficult decision. Thank you all for your overwhelming support and advice. It's been a wild couple of weeks, and I wanted to give you an update. First, the anger. It didn't subside, it intensified. I discovered how my dad found us. Turns out, my dad's sister, the aunt that helped us, gave him our information. She'd been in contact with him, knew where we were, and decided to play mediator without consulting me. I was furious. I called her, and let me tell you, I haven't yelled like that in years. I told her she had no right to interfere, that she had betrayed our trust, and that as far as I was concerned, she was dead to us. She tried to justify her actions, saying he was family and that I was being unforgiving. I hung up on her. The betrayal cut deep. I'd always thought, even with everything, that some part of my dad's family cared. I was wrong. I've cut off all contact with that side of the family. They've proven they don't respect our boundaries, and I refuse to subject Clara to their meddling. I sat Clara down to talk about everything. I did not want to take her choice away, and I knew I couldn't keep her in the dark. I explained everything as calmly and honestly as I could, and showed her the letters from our dad. I told her about his phone calls, his attempt to pick her up from school, and how the aunt that we stayed with before Jess gave him our information. She listened, her eyes wide and filled with a mix of confusion and sadness. She asked, "Why did he leave, James?" That's the question I've been asking myself for years. I told her I didn't know, that some people make bad choices. And that it wasn't her fault. I told her that she was strong and that I would always protect her. Then, I gave her a choice. I told her that if she wanted to see him or talk to him, I wouldn't stop her. I explained that I didn't think it was a good idea, but that it was ultimately her decision. I told her I loved her, no matter what she decided. She didn't answer right away. She asked if she could think about it, and I told her to take all the time she needed. For the next few days, she was quiet and withdrawn. She spent a lot of time in her room, drawing, and sometimes I'd catch her staring out the window, lost in thought. Finally, she came to me. She was holding one of his letters, her little hand trembling. "I want to talk to him," she said, her voice barely a whisper. My heart sank. I was worried, but I remembered my promise. I arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a park, with Jess and I present. He looked nervous, and thinner than I remembered. Clara sat across from him, her posture stiff. They talked. I mostly listened. He apologized, again, saying he was sick and that he loved her. He tried to explain his absence, but his words felt hollow. Clara listened silently, her expression unreadable. After about an hour, she stood up, hugged him, then she said she was ready to go. "But, Clara," he started. She just looked at him and said, "I forgive you, Dad," her eyes filled with a sadness that broke my heart. We walked away, hand in hand. She didn't say a word until we got home. Then, she turned to me, her eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to see him again," she said. "He's not my dad. You are." I hugged her tightly, tears streaming down my face. "I love you, Clara," I whispered. "I'll always be here for you." Then, things escalated. My dad and his sister started showing up at the bookstore, at Clara's school, and even at our house. They were becoming increasingly erratic, their behavior bordering on harassment. They left notes. And even tried to give Clara gifts, which I immediately threw away. I was terrified. I couldn't let them jeopardize Clara's safety. I remembered my mom's sister, Jess. I called her and explained everything, and she was furious. She came over immediately, and together, we went to the police station. With Jess's help, we filed a restraining order against my dad and Aunt Carol. The police took our concerns seriously, especially given their escalating behavior. It was a long, stressful process, but we got it done. Now, we have a sense of security. The restraining order is in place, and the police have been keeping an eye on our neighborhood. Clara is doing better, though she still has her moments. She is still in therapy, working through the trauma. I'm still angry, hurt, and confused. But I'm also relieved. I'm relieved that Clara made her own decision, that she knows I'll always be there for her, and that we're finally free from the chaos he brought into our lives. Thank you again for all your support. It means the world to us.